Okay, so here's a short video on progesterone levels in dogs and when you should when should you breed your dog based on progesterone results that you get from either a vet or maybe from the inexpensive Target canine ovulation test kit that I showed in my previous video. So what we have here is a graph that shows rising progesterone level on the left versus number of days since the inception of heat, which is day -7 on this graph. That is the point where you look down and your little pooch is dropping some blood on the ground. You'll see little red spots on the ground. It's like, oh, my dog's hurt. And in fact, it's not. It's in heat. So you might see the red spots on bedding. You might see that she wears some panties because you know it's that time of the season for her. But basically, this is the first sign of her dropping some blood from her vulva. And you can see here, the pink is the area that you want to breed on. And if you do the math, -7 and +3 is day 10. And so we're talking about breeding a dog between day 10, 11, 12, and 13. That is a normal dog. A normal dog will get bred sometime in that range. And if you've got a normal dog and you breed it sometime in that area, you're likely to have a litter. The more closely you get it to the right time, which we're going to discuss in a moment, then you'll maximize your litter size. The problem is that unfortunately not everybody has a normal dog. Some dogs might be bred as early as day 7, which would be on this graph right here, or as late as day 20, which is way out on the graph right here. But they will all be bred presumably on the same progesterone levels. So what's going on? So if you do a progesterone test on a dog that's just starting out in heat, the progesterone number for that girl will be less than 1, and that's predicted by this part of the graph right here. Normal behavior in a dog in this point right here is a dog who's producing red blood on the ground. Her vulva is swollen. She's probably not flagging, which means that if you rub her rump above her tail, that she's not twisting her tail off to the side. If there are males around, the males may be sniffing on her, but she may allow a male to mount her, but she will not allow that for very long. Will turn around and get him off her back, or maybe even bark or nip at that male. The problem is that different dogs do show different behaviors, and so behavior alone is not an indicator of really exactly what's going on. But the point here is that we've got a low progesterone level, and it stays at a low level of something less than 1 for the first 5-6 days of the heat cycle. Then the progesterone level starts to rise. And the whole thing that triggers this whole process is a thing called the luteinizing hormone. And you can test for this peak. If you can catch this peak with an LH surge test, then this is a great thing to do. The problem is the peak itself is very narrow and may only last for about 12 hours. And so you're going to have to start testing in here and in here and in here so you don't miss this peak, because once the peaks happen, it goes back down to the same level. You can't tell which side of the peak you are. So most people these days don't use the LH surge as a test, but it's very good if you do. But the problem is you're going to have to do lots of tests, and it's not so easy to catch. So the majority of people who are going to do this in a scientific manner do it by, number one, what's the dog doing, dripping blood on the ground. Number 2, how is it behaving in this section right here, not acting like it wants to be mated. How receptive it is for dogs, very receptive as it starts to get into this range right here. Blood color that's dropping on the ground, going from a red color to a pinkish color sometime around the progesterone level of about 5. And then to be bred at a progesterone level that's something around a 10 or a 15. So here we go again. So we've got a dog that for the first 5 or 6 days, dropping red blood, progesterone level comes back as low. The next progesterone test you get, you'll start to see a rise. And you might see a rise, and it's in the 3 and the 4 and the 5 region. Well, most of us accept that a progesterone level of 5 represents a dog that has ovulated. And that will typically be 2 days after the LH surge if you detected it. So this is typically the point that we say the dog is ovulated. On this chart, it's actually about a 4.5. I think most vets would agree with 5 as being the number that they would use. But there's some interpretation here as to which number you should exactly use. I use 5. Okay, so and by the way, it doesn't make too much difference, because once you start to get up in these high progesterone levels, it happens very, very quickly. So let's, for the sake of argument, assume that 5 is the day of ovulation. Well, after ovulation, you have to wait about 2 days before the eggs are planted in the uterine wall and are mature enough to be fertilized. So presenting semen at this point here is too early. You might still result in a pregnancy because the sperm will stay alive for at least a couple of days in the vaginal tract. But this is not optimum. What you'd like to do is you'd like to present the sperm at the time when the eggs are ready to be fertilized and where you've got the majority of the semen that you've put in there is raring to go and it's fresh and hasn't been hanging around for a couple of days wondering what's going on. So the normal advice would be that 2 days after a level of 5, ovulation is the time to breed. And typically you'll see numbers then that are something in the day after ovulation. You should see a number of about 8, and then the second day after ovulation, or the prime time to breed, you should see a progesterone level of around 15. This chart shows it a bit less, but I'm not going to argue about that. So I think that this chart should really come up more in a curve like this from what I'm used to seeing, but that's fine. But the important thing is what we're trying to do is we're trying to find this point of ovulation 5, breed 2 days later, or come up with a progesterone level of 8 and then breed the day after that. So that's the way that I do it. That's the way that most people do it. The other signs that you're going to see is when you're in this region right here, your girl is going to be very receptive to males, which means that if you introduce a male to her, the male will be sniffing around. Depending on, some males will go ape shit and try to breed your dog immediately. Some dogs will be much more gentle and just be sniffing around on her. A lot of dogs, you'll see them do this little dance where the first thing they do when they greet each other is they face off and they kind of do like a Mexican standoff. Their ears are up and they kind of look very alert and they kind of do this bouncing around each other and kind of do a little dancing, running kind of gestures at each other before finally the male will go and get on the female's back. The female, if she's got a tail, she'll move it off to the side. You may see her vulva pulsating and she'll stand there and basically let the male penetrate and then fertilize the eggs. That process is called a tie. When you see that happen, the dogs will actually physically be stuck together from anything from a couple of minutes for maybe as long as 20 minutes. They may be kind of walking, the female may be walking around and dragging the male behind her. It looks very painful, but it's quite normal. And if you see that and you want these dogs to be bred, don't go get a bucket of water and throw it on them. Just let them be. All the breedings that I'm involved with, the kind of dogs that I are involved with, French bulldogs, we do artificial insemination on just about all of those, so we don't allow natural ties. There's reasons why you may not want to do natural ties. You can get dogs that get hurt, you can get dogs that get bitten, you can get handlers that get bitten, and you can transfer diseases like brucellosis and canine herpes. So there's quite a few reasons why I don't allow my males and females, especially females that I don't know, to get anywhere near my males. But the important point here is I want to point out what all this means so you get an idea about what the heck's going on. So basically, just to recap here again one time, what we're looking for is if we can do an LH surge test, we want to breed 4 days after that. If we are doing a progesterone level, we want to look for a progesterone level of 5, breed 2 days after that. A progesterone level of 8, breed 1 day after that. A progesterone level of 15, breed immediately. If you're going to do a surgical insemination, you can add half to 1 day to those times. And the reason for that is you make an incision in the female's abdominal wall and you then insert the semen directly into the uterine horns. And when you do that, the sperm does not have to spend that 12 to 24 hour travel up the vaginal tract. So you would actually normally do a surgical on a higher number at a later point in the mating. So that might be 3 days after ovulation or 5 days after LH surge, or a progesterone level that's quite a bit above 20. Okay, so there it is. If I've got something wrong, then let me know and I'll correct it. And good luck.